I'm staring at my phone screen in complete disbelief, reading the same text message for the fifth time. The words haven't changed, but somehow I keep hoping they will. Emma, after everything that's happened, we've decided it's best if you don't attend the wedding. We need this day to be perfect for Rachel. Love, Mom. The phone trembles in my hands as I sit in my Honda Civic outside the TechSecure Solutions building, where I work as a senior cybersecurity analyst. 24 hours ago, I thought I was going to be walking my little sister down the aisle alongside our father. Now, I'm banned from her wedding entirely, but that text message was just the beginning. Because 3 hours after receiving it, my phone rang with a call that would change everything. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end made my blood run cold. Miss Collins, this is Director Sarah Mitchell from the FBI Cybersecurity Division. We need to meet immediately. What you discovered last month about the Chinese hacking operation wasn't just corporate espionage, it's treason, and we believe your sister's fiancé is involved. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning started like any other Tuesday in August. I was reviewing security protocols for our latest government contract when my personal phone buzzed with what I thought would be a routine family group chat message. Instead, I found myself reading a conversation that had been going on for hours without me. Rachel had started the thread at 6 in the morning with a photo of her final dress fitting, looking radiant in her custom gown from a boutique in Cherry Creek. The responses from our parents were exactly what I expected, endless praise about how beautiful she looked, how proud they were, how this was going to be the wedding of the century at the Grand Aspen Resort. What I didn't expect was the sudden shift in tone when I scrolled further. Mom had written something that made my stomach drop. I'm just so relieved we were able to resolve the situation with Emma. Rachel shouldn't have to worry about any drama on her special day. Dad's response was even worse. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made for the good of the family. Rachel comes first right now. I immediately called Jake, my fiancé, who was at his software engineering job across town in Boulder. Jake, something's wrong with my family. They're talking about me like I did something terrible, but I have no idea what they mean. Jake's voice was steady and reassuring, the way it always was when I needed grounding. What exactly did they say? I read him the messages, and the silence that followed spoke volumes. Emma, this sounds like they're building a narrative without including you in it. You need to go over there and find out what's happening. The drive from Boulder to Lakewood normally takes me about 30 minutes, but today it felt like hours. Every red light gave me more time to spiral into worst-case scenarios. What could I have possibly done to warrant being excluded from family conversations about Rachel's wedding? I'd been nothing but supportive since she got engaged to Brad Thompson 8 months ago. I helped her pick out invitations, gave her advice on vendors, even offered to use my connections in Denver to get better deals on photography and catering. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home on Maple Ridge, I noticed Brad's black BMW was parked in the spot where I usually left my car. Through the front window, I could see the three of them, my parents and Brad, sitting around the dining room table with papers spread between them. The scene looked serious, almost businesslike. I used my key to let myself in, calling out as I entered. "Hey everyone, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." The conversation stopped immediately. All three faces turned toward me with expressions I'd never seen before, guilt mixed with something that looked almost like fear. Mom recovered first, standing up quickly and walking toward me with her arms outstretched. "Emma, honey, we weren't expecting you." Her hug felt forced, and when she pulled away, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad remained seated, but gave me a tight smile. "How's work going?" "Still playing with computers all day." It was Brad who seemed the most uncomfortable. He gathered the papers on the table quickly, shuffling them into a manila folder. "I should probably get going." Rachel's expecting me for lunch. He stood up and shook Dad's hand with an odd formality. Thanks for the information, Mr. Collins. This really helps clarify things. As he passed me on his way to the door, he avoided eye contact entirely. See you later, Emma. Hopefully things work out. After Brad left, the atmosphere in the house became even more tense. Mom busied herself in the kitchen, clattering dishes unnecessarily. Dad retreated to his home office, claiming he had important insurance paperwork to review. I was left standing in the living room, more confused than ever. Mom, what's going on? What did Brad mean about things working out, and why are you all acting so weird? Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her movements nervous and agitated. Emma, sit down, we need to talk. The formality in her voice scared me. This was the same tone she'd used when I was 16, and she had to tell me that Grandma Collins was dying. Your father and I have been talking with Brad about some concerns regarding the wedding. What kind of concerns? I asked, settling onto the couch where I'd spent countless evenings as a child watching family movies. Well, she began, perching on the edge of Dad's recliner like she might need to escape quickly. Brad mentioned that there have been some issues at your workplace. Something about security problems and investigations. He's worried that having someone under federal scrutiny at the wedding might reflect poorly on his family. The words hit me like a physical blow. Federal scrutiny? Mom, what are you talking about? My job requires security clearance. I work on government contracts protecting sensitive information. That's the opposite of being under scrutiny, it means I'm trusted. Dad emerged from his office, clearly having heard enough of the conversation to jump in. Emma, Brad explained how these cybersecurity investigations work. He said that when there are breaches or problems, everyone involved gets looked at suspiciously. His family has business relationships that could be affected by association. I felt my face getting hot with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Brad explained cybersecurity to you. Dad, he works in finance. What does he know about my field? But even as I asked the question, pieces were starting to fall into place. The papers on the table, the way Brad had gathered them so quickly, the formal handshake with Dad. What information was he asking you for? Mom and Dad exchanged a look that confirmed my worst suspicions. He just wanted to understand your work situation better. Mom said carefully, he's concerned about Rachel, and frankly, so are we. My work situation is fine, I said, standing up abruptly. More than fine. Last month I identified a major security breach that could have compromised classified defense communications. I probably saved government secrets from being stolen by foreign hackers. I'm not under investigation, I'm the one who stopped something terrible from happening. But I could see in their face.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
That my explanation wasn't making any difference. They'd already decided to believe Brad's version of events over mine. Emma, Dad said in his most condescending voice, you don't need to get defensive. We're just trying to protect Rachel's special day. Protect it from what? From me being there to support my sister. Mom stood up and walked over to me, placing her hands on my shoulders. Sweetheart, we think it might be better if you skip the wedding. Just this once, for Rachel's sake. Brad's family is very traditional, and they're already nervous about having their son marry into a family they don't know well. If there are any questions about security clearances or federal investigations, there are no federal investigations of me. I practically shouted, shrugging off her hands, and even if there were, I'm your daughter. I'm Rachel's sister. How can you even consider excluding me from her wedding? The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, I realized that they'd already made their decision. This conversation wasn't about getting my input or hearing my side of the story. It was about delivering news that had already been decided in my absence. We've already talked to Rachel, Dad said quietly. She understands. Those 4 words broke something inside me. She understands. Did anyone think to talk to me before making this decision? Did anyone consider that maybe, just maybe, Brad might not have accurate information about my job? Mom's expression hardened slightly. Emma, you're being dramatic. It's just one day. Rachel will have other special moments you can be part of. It's her wedding day, Mom. There won't be another one. At least I hope not. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. And you're right about one thing, I am being dramatic, because the situation is dramatic. My own family is choosing to believe a man they've known for 8 months over a daughter they've known for 28 years. As I reached for the door handle, Mom called after me. Emma, don't leave like this. We can work something out. Maybe you could come to the rehearsal dinner instead. I turned around slowly. No, Mom, you don't get to throw me a consolation prize. Either I'm part of this family, or I'm not. You've made it pretty clear which one you think is true. The drive back to Boulder was a blur of tears and rage. I kept thinking about all the ways I'd supported Rachel over the years, all the family gatherings where I'd been the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who never caused drama or made demands. And now, the first time in my life that my job actually mattered, the first time I was doing something important and meaningful, my own family was using it as a reason to exclude me. When I got back to my downtown loft, I called Jake immediately. He was in a meeting but stepped out to take my call. They don't want me at the wedding, I said without preamble. Brad convinced them that my job makes me some kind of security risk. That's insane, Jake said, his voice tight with anger. Your job makes you the opposite of a security risk. You have clearance specifically because you've been vetted and approved. Try explaining that to them, they've already made up their minds. I collapsed onto my couch, still wearing my work clothes, still holding my purse. Jake, what if they're right? What if I am causing problems for Rachel? Emma, stop. Listen to me. You discovered a major security breach that could have affected national defense. You did your job exactly right. The fact that your family doesn't understand the importance of what you do doesn't make you wrong. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from Rachel, an explanation, an apology, anything that would indicate she hadn't really agreed to exclude me from her wedding. But there was nothing. The group chat that had been active all morning went completely silent after I left my parents' house. The next morning at work, I was distracted and unfocused. My colleague Tyler Brooks noticed immediately. Emma, you look like you haven't slept in days. Everything okay? Tyler had been my closest work friend since I started at TechSecure Solutions 3 years ago. He was one of the few people who really understood the complexity and importance of our work. Family drama, I said, not wanting to get into details. My sister's getting married, and there are some complications. Want to grab coffee after work and talk about it? Tyler offered. Sometimes it helps to get an outside perspective. I was about to decline when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Denver area code, but I didn't recognize the number. Emma, Collins, I answered professionally, assuming it was work-related. Miss Collins, this is Director Sarah Mitchell from the FBI Cybersecurity Division. I need to speak with you immediately about the security breach you identified last month. Can you meet me this afternoon? My blood went cold. I'm sorry, who is this? FBI Director Sarah Mitchell, I'm calling from the Denver field office. The Chinese hacking operation you uncovered goes much deeper than corporate espionage. We have reason to believe it involves someone close to you, and we need your help. I looked around the office, suddenly paranoid that someone might be listening, someone close to me. I don't understand. Miss Collins, we can't discuss this over the phone. Can you meet me at the Starbucks on 16th Street downtown at 4 o'clock today? Come alone, and don't tell anyone about this call. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, wondering if I'd just received a prank call or if my life had just taken another completely unexpected turn. The timing seemed impossible. Less than 24 hours after being banned from my sister's wedding, the FBI was calling me about the work that had supposedly made me a security risk. Tyler appeared at my cubicle again. "Emma, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" "I think I need to leave early today," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something just came up. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept racing between my family situation and the FBI call. Were they connected somehow? Brad had seemed so knowledgeable about federal investigations and security clearances. How did a finance manager know so much about cybersecurity protocols? At 3:30, I left the office and drove to downtown Denver. The Starbucks on 16th Street was busy with the afternoon rush, filled with business people grabbing late-day caffeine fixes. I ordered a coffee I didn't really want and found a table in the corner where I could watch the door. At exactly 4 o'clock, a woman in her mid-40s walked in, scanning the room methodically. She was dressed professionally in a navy suit, with short brown hair and the kind of posture that suggested authority. When her eyes met mine, she walked directly to my table. "Emma Collins?" she asked, and I nodded. "Director Sarah Mitchell, FBI Cybersecurity Division." She showed me her credentials quickly before sitting down across from me. "Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual. Director Mitchell, I have to ask, is this related to my security clearance? Because my family seems to think I'm under some kind of federal investigation." She frowned. "Miss Collins, you're not under investigation. Quite the opposite. The work you did identifying that security breach last month was exceptional. You may have prevented classified defense information from falling into the hands of Chinese intelligence." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by anger. Then why is my sister's fiancé telling my family that I'm some kind of security risk? Director Mitchell's expression sharpened. "Tell me about your sister's fiancé. What's his name?" "Brad Thompson. He works in finance for some investment firm downtown. But he seemed to know a lot about federal investigations and security protocols when he talked to my parents." "Emma, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The security breach you identified last month wasn't random. It was specifically targeting information related to defense contracts that your company handles. Someone with inside knowledge helped the hackers know exactly what to look for and when to look for it." My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as my hands started shaking. "Inside knowledge? You mean someone at my company?" "Not necessarily at your company. Someone with access to information about your company's contracts and security protocols. Someone who might know details about your work, your clearance level, your access to sensitive systems." The pieces started falling into place with horrible clarity. Brad asked my parents about my work. He wanted to know about my security clearance, about any investigations. He said he was worried about his family's reputation. Director Mitchell pulled out a small recording device and placed it on the table between us. "Emma, I need to ask you some very specific questions about what Brad Thompson knows about your work, and then I need to ask you to do something that's going to be very difficult. We need you to help us find out exactly how much information he's already obtained, and we need to do it without him knowing we're onto him." I stared at the recording device, understanding that whatever I said next would be part of an official FBI investigation. "Director Mitchell, if Brad is involved in espionage, and if he's been getting information through my family, then my sister is in danger, isn't she? That's exactly why we need your help, Emma, and it's why we need to move fast. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and we believe that's when he's planning to make his final transfer of information before disappearing." Suddenly, being banned from Rachel's wedding took on an entirely different meaning. It wasn't about protecting Brad's family from embarrassment. It was about preventing me from being there to witness whatever Brad was really planning to do. What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Director Mitchell smiled grimly. We need you to become our inside source, Emma. We need you to be our special agent. The weight of Director Mitchell's words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Special agent. The title felt surreal coming from an FBI director's mouth, especially when just hours earlier, my own family had treated me like a liability. I looked around the busy Starbucks, watching ordinary people go about their ordinary lives, completely unaware that a conversation about national security was happening at the corner table. Director Mitchell, I need to understand something, I said, leaning forward slightly. If Brad is really involved in espionage, why hasn't he been arrested already? Why do you need me to investigate him? She folded her hands on the table, her expression grave. Because we don't have enough evidence yet. What we have are suspicious patterns in the data breach, financial transactions that don't quite add up, and communication intercepts that suggest someone on the inside was feeding information to Chinese intelligence. But patterns and suspicions won't hold up in federal court. We need concrete proof of exactly how the information was obtained and transferred. My mind was racing, trying to process the implications of what she was telling me. So you think Brad has been using me to get access to classified information, but he's never asked me directly about my work. He's actually seemed pretty disinterested in what I do. That's exactly what makes him dangerous. Director Mitchell replied, smart operatives don't ask direct questions. They gather information through casual conversations, family dinners, overheard phone calls, papers left lying around. Think about it, Emma. Has he ever been around when you've discussed work? Has he shown up unexpectedly at family gatherings? Has he asked your parents questions about your job? The memories came flooding back with uncomfortable clarity. Brad had been at Easter dinner when I'd mentioned getting a new security clearance upgrade. He'd been helping Dad fix the garage door when I'd called to tell Mom about the promotion that gave me access to more sensitive contracts. He'd been at Rachel's birthday party in June when Tyler had called me about the security breach discovery, and I'd stepped outside to take the call. How many conversations had he been within earshot of without me realizing it? He's been gathering intelligence at family functions, I said slowly, the full scope of his manipulation becoming clear. And now he's convinced my parents to ban me from the wedding so I won't be there to potentially interfere with whatever he's planning to do. Director Mitchell nodded approvingly. Exactly, which is why we need you to be our eyes and ears. We need someone who can observe his behavior, document his actions, and potentially record conversations without raising suspicion. The thought of wearing a wire or secretly recording my sister's fiancé made my stomach turn. Director Mitchell, I understand the seriousness of the situation, but Rachel is my sister. If Brad is really dangerous, shouldn't we be focused on protecting her rather than using this situation to gather evidence? Emma, the best way to protect Rachel is to get Brad out of her life permanently. If we arrest him now without solid evidence, he might get released on bail or beat the charges entirely. Then he disappears, Rachel's heart is broken, and he continues his espionage activities from another location with another identity. But if we can build an airtight case against him, he goes to federal prison for a very long time, and Rachel eventually understands that we saved her from making the biggest mistake of her life. I thought about Rachel, probably at this very moment excitedly planning final wedding details with a man who was potentially a foreign spy. The irony was overwhelming. My family had excluded me from the wedding to protect Rachel from imaginary security risks, while the real threat was the man she was about to marry. What exactly would you need me to do? I asked. Director Mitchell reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small device that looked like a regular smartphone charger. This is a recording device. It's voice activated and has a range of about 30 feet. We'd need you to find ways to be around Brad when he thinks he's safe to make phone calls or have private conversations. But I'm banned from all the wedding events. My family made it clear they don't want me around. That's actually going to work in our favor, she said with a slight smile. People are less careful about what they say when they think the person they're worried about isn't there. We need you to start showing up unexpectedly. Family dinner, wedding planning sessions, dress fittings, make it seem like you're trying to repair relationships and be included again. The plan was starting to make sense, but it felt like emotional torture. So I have to pretend to beg my way back into my sister's wedding while secretly investigating her fiancé for treason. That's what you're asking me to do. I know it's difficult, Emma. But you have unique access that no other FBI agent could possibly get, your family. You have legitimate reasons to be around these people and these events. And frankly, you're the only person in this situation who has both the technical background to understand what evidence we need and the personal motivation to see this through. I stared at the recording device, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 24 hours ago, my biggest worry was whether Rachel would like the wedding gift I'd bought her. Now I was being recruited by the FBI to spy on her fiancé. If I do this, what happens to my relationship with my family? Even if Brad turns out to be everything you think he is, they're going to know I was working with the FBI against him. Emma, if Brad is convicted of espionage, your family will understand that you were protecting national security and potentially saving Rachel from a lifetime of deception. If he's innocent, then no harm is done, and you've helped clear an innocent man. But I could see in her eyes that Director Mitchell didn't really believe Brad was innocent. She was convinced he was guilty, and she needed my help to prove it. How long do we have? 3 weeks until the wedding. We believe that's his deadline for transferring the final batch of classified information before he and Rachel leave for their honeymoon in Europe. Once he's out of the country, it becomes much harder to apprehend him. The thought of Rachel unknowingly honeymoon with a foreign spy made my decision for me. Okay, I'll do it, but I need guarantees about Rachel's safety, and I need to know that if this goes wrong, the FBI will protect my family. Director Mitchell extended her hand across the table. You have my word, Emma. Welcome to the team. That evening, I sat in my loft apartment staring at the recording device and a folder of instructions Director Mitchell had given me. Jake was working late on a project deadline, so I had time to process everything that had happened. The apartment felt different now, like I was seeing it through the eyes of someone who might be under surveillance. Were there people watching me? Did Brad know about my meeting with the FBI? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emma, this is Agent Carlos Rodriguez. I'll be your primary contact during the operation. Call this number if you need immediate assistance or if you discover anything urgent. Good luck. Below his message was a phone number with instructions to save it under a code name. I saved the number as Carlos Gym Trainer and deleted the original message. The mundane cover story felt surreal. I was officially part of an FBI operation now, with code names and secret communications. Part of me wondered if I was dreaming. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed time to figure out how to approach my family without seeming suspicious. The recording device was hidden in my purse, and I'd practiced activating it discreetly. My plan was to drive to my parents' house and attempt to have a conversation about being included in wedding events again. The drive to Lakewood felt different this time. Instead of dreading a confrontation with my family, I was mentally preparing for an undercover operation. I parked in the driveway behind Mom's car, took a deep breath, and activated the recording device before getting out of my car. Mom answered the door in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. Emma, what are you doing here so early? I couldn't sleep last night, I said, which was completely true. Mom, I need to talk to you and Dad about the wedding situation. I think I overreacted yesterday, and I want to make things right with Rachel. Her expression softened slightly. Come in, sweetheart. Your father's getting ready for work, but we can talk for a few minutes. The house smelled like coffee and bacon, normal morning smells, that contrasted sharply with the covert operation I was conducting.
Dad emerged from the bedroom hallway, adjusting his tie and looking surprised to see me. Emma, everything all right? I wanted to apologize for how I handled things yesterday, I said, settling into the familiar routine of family conflict resolution. I know you and Mom are just trying to protect Rachel, and I shouldn't have gotten so defensive about my work situation. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that I recognized from childhood. It was their silent communication about whether to believe that I'd learned my lesson. We appreciate that, Emma, Dad said carefully, but the situation with Brad's family hasn't changed. They're still concerned about having someone with federal security issues at the wedding. Dad, what if I could get some kind of official documentation that shows I'm not under investigation? Would that help ease their concerns? Mom perked up at this suggestion. Could you do that? Get something in writing from your company or the government that shows everything is fine with your job. I nodded enthusiastically, knowing that Director Mitchell could easily provide such documentation. I think so. My security officer at work mentioned that they can issue letters confirming clearance status for situations like this. Dad checked his watch and grabbed his briefcase. Emma, if you can get that kind of documentation, we'll definitely reconsider the wedding situation. Brad just wants to make sure there won't be any complications that could affect his career or his family's reputation. After Dad left for work, Mom and I sat at the kitchen table where I'd eaten countless breakfasts as a child. Mom, can I ask you something about Brad? I know I haven't spent as much time with him as you and Dad have, but he seems to know a lot about federal investigations and security clearances. Has he mentioned dealing with that kind of thing in his work? Mom stirred sugar into her coffee thoughtfully. Now that you mention it, he has talked about working with some government clients in his finance job. He said that's how he knew about the security clearance process and why he was so concerned about your situation. Government clients in finance, do you know which agencies or what kind of work? I think he mentioned something about defense contractors, companies that work with the military, or something like that. He said it's very sensitive work, and that even small security questions can cause big problems for everyone involved. My pulse quickened. If Brad really worked with defense contractors, he would have legitimate knowledge about security clearances and federal investigations, but it also meant he would know exactly what kind of classified information would be valuable to foreign intelligence services. Has he ever asked you or Dad specific questions about my work? Like what projects I'm involved in, or what
kind of clearance level I have? Mom looked thoughtful. Well, he's asked general questions about your job. He wanted to understand why you travel to different military bases sometimes, and he was curious about the government contracts your company handles. But that seemed natural, you know? He's going to be part of the family, so he wants to understand what everyone does for work. Everything Director Mitchell had told me was checking out. Brad had been systematically gathering information about my work through casual family conversations, and he'd positioned himself as knowledgeable about security issues to gain credibility. Mom, when he asks these questions about my work, does he ever take notes or seem particularly interested in specific details? Emma, why are you asking so many questions about Brad? I thought you wanted to apologize and make peace for Rachel's sake. I realized I was pushing too hard and needed to back off. I'm sorry, Mom. I guess I'm just trying to understand his concerns better so I can address them properly. I want to make sure I get the right kind of documentation to satisfy his family's worries. Mom smiled and patted my hand. That's very mature of you, sweetheart. I know this whole situation has been stressful, but Brad really is a good man. He loves Rachel and he's just trying to protect their future together. After leaving my parents' house, I drove to a parking lot near the Boulder Reservoir and called Agent Rodriguez. Carlos, it's Emma. I just finished my first conversation with my mother, and I think we're on the right track. Brad has definitely been asking detailed questions about my work, and he's claimed to have government clients in his finance job. That's excellent work, Emma. Can you find out more specifics about his claimed government work? If he's lying about his client base, That could be crucial evidence. I think I can get more information at family dinner this Sunday. My mom mentioned that Brad and Rachel usually come over, and I can probably get invited now that I'm cooperating with the wedding plans again. Perfect. In the meantime, we're going to run background checks on his claimed employment history. If there are discrepancies between what he's telling your family and his actual work record, we'll have another piece of the puzzle. That afternoon, I drove to downtown Denver to meet with Director Mitchell at the FBI field office. The building was imposing gray concrete with minimal windows and serious-looking security guards. After going through multiple checkpoints and metal detectors, I was escorted to a small conference room where Director Mitchell was waiting with two other agents. Emma, I want you to meet Agent Jennifer Park, our tech specialist, and Agent Rodriguez, who you've already spoken with by phone. Both agents shook my hand professionally, and I felt like I was being welcomed into an exclusive club. Agent Park opened a laptop and turned it toward me. Emma, we've been analyzing the financial data from the security breach you discovered. What we're seeing suggests that whoever provided inside information was paid through a series of cryptocurrency transactions that were then converted to traditional banking deposits. She showed me a chart of financial transactions that meant nothing to me, but the amounts were substantial. These payments total over $200,000 over the past 6 months. That's not casual consulting money, that's payment for serious intelligence. Director Mitchell leaned forward. Emma, we need you to find out how Brad can afford his lifestyle. Your sister works in marketing, probably makes decent money, but nothing extraordinary. He claims to work in finance, but we can't verify the government contracts he's mentioned to your family. Yet he's driving a BMW, paying for a $75,000 wedding, and just put a down payment on a house in Cherry Creek that cost over $500,000. The numbers were staggering. Rachel had mentioned the house purchase, and I'd been impressed that Brad was doing so well in his career. Now it looked like his financial success might be coming from selling American secrets to foreign governments. How do I investigate his finances without being obvious about it? Agent Rodriguez smiled. You're going to do what every curious future sister-in-law would do. You're going to ask innocent questions about their plans, their future, how they can afford such a nice lifestyle. People love to brag about their success, and if Brad is as arrogant as most criminals, he'll want to impress you with how well he's doing. Over the next hour, the agents briefed me on specific things to listen for and questions to ask. They gave me a new recording device that looked like a fitness tracker and showed me how to activate it with a simple gesture. They also provided me with the security clearance documentation I'd promised my parents, along with a cover story about having been commended by the Department of Defense for my work on cybersecurity. Emma, Director Mitchell said as the meeting concluded, I want you to understand that what you're doing is genuinely dangerous. If Brad realizes you're investigating him, he could become desperate. Desperate people make unpredictable decisions. If at any point you feel unsafe or compromised, you call Agent Rodriguez immediately and extract yourself from the situation. Walking out of the FBI building, I felt like a different person than the one who had entered. I was now officially a confidential informant in a federal espionage investigation. The recording device on my wrist felt heavy with responsibility, and every person on the street looked potentially suspicious. That evening, Jake came home from work to find me cooking dinner and trying to act normal. How was your day? He asked, kissing my cheek and grabbing a beer from the refrigerator. Did you talk to your family about the wedding situation? Actually, yes. I think we're making progress. I'm going to get some documentation about my security clearance that should address their concerns. I hated lying to Jake, but Director Mitchell had been very clear that operational security required limiting information to essential personnel only. That's great news. I know how much being part of Rachel's wedding means to you. Jake settled onto the couch with his beer. So what changed their minds? I served dinner and tried to give him an edited version of the truth. I think once I stopped being defensive and started listening to their concerns, we were able to find a solution that works for everyone. But Jake knew me too well. Emma, something's different about you today. You seem stressed about something other than the wedding drama. Looking at his concerned face, I wanted desperately to tell him everything. Jake was the person I trusted most in the world, and keeping secrets from him felt wrong. But I also knew that involving him could put him in danger and potentially compromise the investigation. "I'm just nervous about repairing things with my family," I said, which was partly true. This whole situation has made me realize how fragile family relationships can be. That night, as Jake slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the complexity of the situation I'd gotten myself into. In 3 weeks, I was supposed to help the FBI arrest my sister's fiancé for espionage at their wedding reception. Rachel would be devastated, my parents would be humiliated, and I would have to live with the knowledge that I'd been secretly working against my family, even while they were trying to include me again. But if Brad really was a foreign spy, then Rachel was in danger, and potentially so was national security. The classified information he'd stolen could be used to harm American military personnel or compromise defense operations. When I thought about it that way, my personal discomfort seemed insignificant compared to the larger stakes involved. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Mom told me you want to work things out. Can we have lunch tomorrow? I miss my big sister." For the first time in days, I smiled genuinely. Whatever else happened, I was going to get my relationship with Rachel back, and if I was lucky, I was going to save her from the biggest mistake of her life. I texted back, "Yes, I'd love that. Name the place and time." Within minutes, she responded with details for lunch at a cafe in Cherry Creek, not far from the house she and Brad had just purchased. Perfect. I'd get to see my sister and potentially gather intelligence about Brad's financial situation at the same time. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I wondered if this was how real FBI agents felt starting dangerous undercover operations. The mixture of excitement, fear, and determination was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Tomorrow, I would begin my double life as both a loving sister and a federal informant. The recording device on my nightstand seemed to pulse with possibility in the darkness. Whatever Brad was hiding, I was going to find it, and I was going to make sure he never hurt Rachel or anyone else again. The Cherry Creek Cafe Rachel had chosen was exactly the kind of upscale establishment that matched the neighborhood's expensive reputation. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed an interior of exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lighting, and reclaimed wood tables that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table where I could see the entire restaurant while testing the new recording device disguised as a fitness tracker. Rachel walked in wearing a flowing sundress that I'd never seen before, designer sunglasses perched atop her freshly highlighted hair, and carrying a leather purse that I recognized as the Coach bag she'd been coveting for months but couldn't afford on her marketing salary. She looked radiant and expensive in a way that made me wonder exactly how Brad was funding their lifestyle upgrade. "Emma," she exclaimed, rushing over to hug me with genuine enthusiasm. "I've missed you so much. This whole wedding stress has been crazy, and I felt terrible about what happened at Mom and Dad's." I hugged her back, fighting the guilt that came with knowing I was recording our conversation for the FBI. "I missed you too, Rach. I'm sorry I got so defensive about the work stuff. I know you and Brad are just trying to have the perfect wedding day." She settled into the chair across from me, immediately launching into animated chatter about wedding details. "You should see the final menu Brad's family helped us select. They know the executive chef at the Grand Aspen Resort personally, so we're getting upgraded to the premium dinner service at no extra cost. And the flowers. Brad's mom has connections with this amazing florist who usually only does celebrity weddings in Los Angeles." Every detail she mentioned sounded increasingly expensive, far beyond what a marketing coordinator and finance manager should be able to afford. "Wow, Brad's family really has incredible connections. You're so lucky to be marrying into that kind of network." Rachel beamed with pride. "I know, right? Brad always says it's not what you know, it's who you know. His business relationships have opened so many doors for us. Like the house in Cherry Creek, we got it for almost $100,000 below asking price, because Brad knew someone who knew the seller's family. That's amazing. A house in Cherry Creek must have been expensive even with a discount."
I tried to sound impressed rather than suspicious. 750,000, Rachel said casually, as if that number wasn't absolutely staggering for someone in her income bracket. But Brad's been doing really well with his international clients lately. He's been working on some major deals that have huge commission potential. International clients. Director Mitchell's briefing had mentioned that the Chinese intelligence operation involved handlers who posed as legitimate business contacts. What kind of international work does he do? That sounds so exciting. Rachel's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. Oh, international finance stuff. He works with overseas investors who want to put money into American companies. It's all very complicated and confidential. The server approached our table, interrupting the conversation. We ordered salads and iced teas, giving me time to process what Rachel had revealed. Brad was dealing with international clients involving American investments, which could easily be a cover story for selling classified information to foreign intelligence services. Rachel, I have to ask something that might sound weird, but has Brad ever asked you questions about my work? Like specific details about what I do or who I work for? She looked confused by the question. Not really specific question. He's mentioned that he thinks it's cool that you work on government stuff, and he's impressed by your security clearance. Why? I'm just trying to understand why his family was so concerned about federal investigations and security issues. It seems like he knows a lot about that world. Rachel laughed, relaxing again. Oh, that. Brad explained that some of his international clients are really paranoid about security. They do business with defense contractors sometimes, so they're super careful about anything that might suggest government oversight or investigations. When Brad mentioned that you might be involved in some kind of federal review, they freaked out about potential complications. Everything was making sense now. Brad had used his supposed knowledge of security protocols to convince my family that I was a liability, while actually using the situation to gather more information about my access to classified systems. Did Brad ever mention which defense contractors his clients work with? Emma, why are you asking so many questions about Brad's work? You're starting to sound like an investigator or something. I forced a laugh, realizing I was pushing too hard again. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand his concerns so I can avoid causing problems in the future. I never want to be the reason you can't have the perfect wedding day. Rachel's expression softened. You know what? I think Brad would really appreciate hearing that from you directly. He felt terrible about the whole situation, but he was just trying to protect our future. Maybe you two should have a conversation and clear the air. That's a great idea. Do you think he'd be open to meeting for coffee or something? Actually, he's picking me up here after lunch. We're going to look at some last-minute details for the reception. You could talk to him then if you want. My pulse quickened, an unexpected opportunity to observe Brad and potentially record a conversation with him. That sounds perfect. I'd love to apologize to him directly, and maybe get his advice on how to handle the security clearance documentation. We spent the next 30 minutes talking about wedding details and catching up on family news. Rachel showed me photos of the dress alterations, the final flower arrangements, and the custom wedding favors that probably cost more than most people's entire wedding budgets. Every expense she mentioned reinforced my suspicion that Brad's income source wasn't legitimate. Oh, there he is, Rachel said, waving toward the restaurant entrance. Brad walked in wearing an expensive suit that looked custom-tailored, carrying what appeared to be a brand-new briefcase. He approached our table with a smile that seemed genuinely pleased to see me. Emma, this is a nice surprise. Rachel mentioned that you wanted to work things out regarding the wedding. I stood to shake his hand, noticing that his grip was firm and his eye contact was steady, classic signs of someone comfortable with deception. Brad, I owe you an apology. I got defensive about my work situation without really understanding your family's concerns. I know you were just trying to protect Rachel and your future together. I appreciate that, Emma. And I want you to know that my concerns weren't personal. In my line of work, I've seen how federal investigations can complicate business relationships, even when the person being investigated hasn't done anything wrong. Rachel excused herself to use the restroom, leaving Brad and me alone at the table. This was my chance to gather intelligence while building rapport. Brad, Rachel mentioned that you work with international clients. That must be fascinating, but also probably pretty stressful with all the security considerations. His demeanor became more animated. It really is. The global finance world is incredibly complex, especially when you're dealing with clients who have interests in American defense and technology sectors. You have to be constantly aware of regulations, security protocols, export restrictions. One small mistake can cause huge problems for everyone involved. Export restrictions. That sounds complicated. Oh, it's a nightmare. The US government is very strict about what kind of technology and information can be shared with foreign entities, even in legitimate business contexts. Companies that work on defense contracts have to be especially careful about who they share data with and how that data is protected. I felt the recording device capturing every word. Brad was essentially confessing to detailed knowledge of the exact security protocols that would govern the kind of classified information he was suspected of stealing. It sounds like you really understand the government contracting world. Have you worked with defense contractors directly? Brad's eyes flickered with something that might have been caution. Not directly, but several of my clients have business relationships with companies in that sector. You learn a lot about security requirements when you're handling investments for people who are concerned about regulatory compliance. Rachel returned from the restroom, and Brad immediately shifted the conversation back to wedding planning. Emma, I hope this means you'll be able to join us for the celebration. Rachel has been really upset about the family tension, and I know it would mean everything to her to have you there. I'm working on getting the security clearance documentation that should address your family's concerns. My company's security officer said they can provide a letter confirming that I'm not under any kind of investigation. That would be perfect, Brad said, but I noticed he didn't seem particularly enthusiastic about the prospect of me attending the wedding. Emma, when you get that documentation, would it be possible for me to review it first, just to make sure it addresses the specific concerns my family raised? The request seemed reasonable on the surface, but it also meant Brad wanted to see official documentation about my security status. If he really was involved in espionage, that information could be valuable for assessing whether I posed a threat to his operations. Of course, I should have it by early next week. We said our goodbyes outside the restaurant, and I watched Brad and Rachel drive away in his BMW. The car was this year's model, probably worth more than I made in an entire year. Everything about Brad's lifestyle suggested income far beyond what a legitimate finance job would provide. I drove directly to a secure location and called Agent Rodriguez. Carlos, I just spent an hour with Rachel and Brad and I think we're onto something big. He demonstrated detailed knowledge of defense contractor security protocols and export restrictions. He also specifically requested to review my security clearance documentation before the wedding. Excellent work, Emma. That request for documentation is particularly interesting. It suggests he wants to assess your access level and potential threat to his operations. We're going to provide you with realistic-looking documents that include some subtle markers that will help us track if he copies or photographs them. There's something else. Rachel mentioned that they bought a $750,000 house in Cherry Creek, and everything about their lifestyle suggests income far beyond their supposed salaries. Brad claimed his success comes from international clients who invest in American companies, particularly in the defense and technology sectors. That's exactly the kind of cover story we'd expect from someone involved in economic espionage. Emma, you've gathered more useful intelligence in one lunch meeting than we've been able to develop in weeks of surveillance. This is exceptional work. After ending the call, I drove to my office to catch up on legitimate work and maintain my normal routine. Tyler Brooks noticed immediately that I seemed distracted. Emma, you've been acting strange lately. Is everything okay with your family's situation? Actually, things are improving. I'm going to be able to attend Rachel's wedding after all. The lie came easily now, which worried me. How many deceptions was I going to have to maintain as this operation continued? That's great news. I know how much that meant to you. Tyler paused at my cubicle. Emma, I don't want to pry, but you seem stressed about something beyond family drama. If there's anything going on that you need to talk about, I'm here. Tyler was one of the most perceptive people I knew, and his concern was genuine, but I couldn't risk compromising the operation by confiding in anyone outside the FBI team. Thanks, Tyler. I think once the wedding is over and things settle down, I'll feel much better. That evening Jake and I had dinner at our favorite restaurant in Boulder. The normalcy of our conversation felt surreal after the day I'd had recording conversations for a federal investigation. Jake talked about his software project, I shared edited details about my lunch with Rachel, and we made plans for the upcoming weekend like any normal couple. Emma, I'm really proud of how you handled the situation with your family, Jake said over dessert. It would have been easy to stay angry and miss Rachel's wedding, but you found a way to make peace and be there for her. That takes maturity. The guilt was overwhelming. Jake thought I was being mature and diplomatic, when actually I was conducting a covert investigation that could destroy my family's happiness. Jake, can I ask you something hypothetical? Sure. If you discovered that someone close to us was involved in something illegal or dangerous, but exposing them would hurt people you love, what would you do? Jake considered the question seriously. I think it would depend on how dangerous the situation was, and how many people could be affected. Why? Is this about Rachel's wedding drama? No, just something I was thinking about, the ethics of whistleblowing and loyalty to family versus larger responsibilities. Well, I think ultimately you have to consider what would cause the most harm in the long run. Sometimes protecting someone from the immediate consequences of their actions actually enables them to cause more damage later. His answer was exactly what Director Mitchell had said about building a strong case against Brad, rather than arresting him prematurely. The parallel wasn't accidental. I was seeking validation for the choice I'd already made to cooperate with the FBI. Later that night, I received a text from an unknown number. Emma, this is Jennifer Park from yesterday's meeting. We've completed the background check on Brad Thompson's employment history. Can you meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., same location as before? I saved the number under Jenny Meich Yoga Instructor and deleted the original message. The FBI was working fast, which suggested they were taking the espionage threat very seriously. The next morning I sat in the same conference room at the FBI field office, looking at financial records and employment documents that painted a completely different picture of Brad Thompson than the one he'd presented to my family. Emma, Agent Park began. Brad Thompson does work for Meridian Financial Group, which is a legitimate investment firm in downtown Denver. However, his salary and commission structure couldn't possibly support the lifestyle he's been maintaining. His official income last year was $68,000. She showed me bank statements and financial records, but look at these deposit patterns. Over the past 18 months, he's received irregular deposits totaling nearly $400,000. These deposits don't correspond to any legitimate business activity we can identify. Director Mitchell leaned forward. Emma, the timing of these deposits correlates almost perfectly with security breaches at companies that handle classified defense contracts. Someone has been systematically paying Brad Thompson for information, and that information is ending up in the hands of Chinese intelligence services. So he really is a spy, I said, the reality of the situation finally sinking in completely. He's what we call an asset, Agent Rodriguez explained. He's not a trained intelligence officer, but he's been recruited and paid by foreign handlers to gather specific types of information. In many ways, that makes him more dangerous because he's not operating under diplomatic cover or professional protocols. Agent Park pulled up another document on her laptop. Emma, we need you to understand something crucial. The security breach you discovered at your company wasn't random. Our analysis shows that whoever provided inside information had specific knowledge about your access levels, your project assignments, and your security clearance status. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Brad has been using information about my work to help foreign spies target my company's classified systems. Exactly, and based on the timeline, we believe he's been gathering information about you specifically for over a year, possibly since he started dating Rachel. Director Mitchell's expression was grim. Emma, we think Brad Thompson specifically targeted your sister as a way to get close to you and gather intelligence about your work. This entire relationship might be built on espionage objectives rather than genuine feelings. The thought of Rachel being used as an unwitting asset in a foreign intelligence operation made me feel sick. She was planning to marry someone who had potentially approached her specifically to spy on her sister. Director Mitchell, if Brad targeted Rachel to get to me, then she's been manipulated from the very beginning of their relationship. That's why we need concrete evidence before we move against him. If we're right about his motivations, Rachel is going to need all the support she can get when the truth comes out. Agent Rodriguez handed me a new set of documents. Emma, these are the security clearance papers we want you to give to Brad. They look completely legitimate, but they contain embedded markers that will help us track if he photographs or copies them. We've also included some false information about your current project assignments that should help us confirm whether he's passing intelligence to his handlers. Looking at the official-looking documents, I realized that I was now actively participating in a counterintelligence operation. If Brad really was a spy, these papers could help expose his entire network. What happens after he takes the bait? Director Mitchell smiled grimly. Then we spring the trap. Emma, in 2 weeks we're going to find out exactly who Brad Thompson really is and who he's working for. And we're going to make sure he never has the opportunity to betray American secrets again. As I left the FBI building with the fake documents in my purse, I thought about Rachel excitedly planning her wedding to a man who might have targeted her specifically to gather intelligence about her sister. The betrayal was so complete and calculating that it took my breath away. But I also felt a sense of purpose that I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my life, my work wasn't just about protecting computer systems or earning a paycheck. I was actively working to protect national security and potentially save my sister from the most devastating deception imaginable. The fake security clearance documents felt heavy in my purse as I drove back to Boulder. In a few days, I would hand them to Brad Thompson and begin the final phase of the operation that would either prove his innocence or expose him as a foreign spy. Either way, nothing in my family would ever be the same again. The fake security clearance documents sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I worked up the courage to call Brad. Every time I looked at them, I thought about Rachel trying on her wedding dress, blissfully unaware that her fiancé might be a foreign spy who had targeted her specifically to get close to me. The weight of what I was about to do felt crushing, but Director Mitchell's words kept echoing in my mind. Sometimes protecting someone means exposing the truth, no matter how painful. Brad, it's Emma. I got the security
Clearance documentation you wanted to review. Would you like to meet for coffee this afternoon? His response was immediate and enthusiastic. That's fantastic, Emma. Yes, let's meet. How about that Starbucks near the Cherry Creek Mall? I can be there in an hour. The eagerness in his voice confirmed my suspicions. A legitimate fiancé concerned about family reputation wouldn't be quite so excited to review government security documents. I activated the recording device on my wrist and drove to Cherry Creek, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Brad was already waiting when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with perfect sightlines to monitor the entire coffee shop. He stood up immediately when he saw me, his smile warm and welcoming. Emma, thank you so much for handling this so professionally. I know the whole situation has been awkward for everyone. I handed him the folder containing the fake documents, watching his reaction carefully. His eyes lit up as he opened it, scanning the official-looking letterhead and government seals with what appeared to be genuine fascination. This is exactly what my family needed to see. Very thorough and professional. I'm just glad we can put this whole misunderstanding behind us, I said, settling into the chair across from him. My security officer said these documents confirm that I'm not under any kind of investigation and that my clearance level gives me access to some pretty sensitive projects. Brad's attention sharpened noticeably. Sensitive projects? That's impressive. What kind of work are you involved in these days? The question was perfectly innocent on the surface, but I could hear the underlying hunger for information. Oh, the usual cybersecurity stuff. Protecting communication systems for defense contractors, analyzing foreign threats to military networks, that kind of thing. Probably boring to someone in international finance like you. Actually, it's fascinating, Brad said, leaning forward slightly. Some of my clients have investments in companies that do similar work. They're always concerned about cybersecurity threats, especially from Chinese hackers. There it was. Brad had just revealed specific knowledge about Chinese cyber threats while expressing interest in defense contractor work. I felt the recording device capturing every word. Chinese hackers are definitely a major concern. We've been tracking several sophisticated operations targeting American defense systems. Brad's expression became more intense. Really? What kind of operations? My clients would be very interested in understanding the scope of these threats. I gave him some of the false information that Agent Park had included in my briefing. Well, there's been a lot of activity around satellite communication systems and missile guidance technology. The Chinese are particularly interested in anything related to next-generation weapon systems. Satellite communications, Brad repeated as if filing the information away. That makes sense. My clients have mentioned concerns about space-based assets. Emma, would it be possible for me to make a copy of these security documents? Just so I can show my family that everything has been properly verified. My pulse quickened. This was exactly what the FBI had hoped would happen. Of course, there's a copy center right down the hall. We walked to the copy center together, and I watched Brad carefully examine each page as the machine reproduced the documents. He took particular interest in the sections detailing my security clearance level and current project assignments, exactly the kind of information that would be valuable to foreign intelligence services. This really puts everyone's minds at ease, Brad said, handing me back the originals. Emma, I hope you know that I never had anything personal against you. I was just trying to protect Rachel and our future together. I understand completely. Family comes first. The irony of those words wasn't lost on me as I said them. We parted ways in the parking lot, and I immediately drove to a secure location to call Agent Rodriguez. Carlos? He took the bait completely. He made copies of all the documents and showed specific interest in the false information about satellite communications and weapon systems. He also asked detailed questions about Chinese cyber threats. Outstanding work, Emma. We now have him on record expressing knowledge of foreign intelligence operations and actively seeking classified information. The documents he copied contain tracking markers that will help us identify when and how he transmits the information to his handlers. What happens next? Now we wait and watch. If Brad is working for Chinese intelligence, he'll need to pass this information along quickly. We have surveillance teams monitoring his communications and movements. Within the next 48 hours, we should know exactly who he's working for. That evening, I had dinner with Jake at a small Italian restaurant near our apartment. I tried to act normal, but the stress of the undercover operation was taking its toll. Jake noticed my distraction immediately. Emma, you've barely touched your food. Is everything okay? You've seemed tense ever since you started working things out with your family. I wanted desperately to tell him everything, but operational security required maintaining my cover even with the people closest to me. I'm just nervous about the wedding. There's still so much that could go wrong, and I want everything to be perfect for Rachel. Jake reached across the table and took my hand. Emma, you're a good sister. Whatever happened between you and your family, the fact that you're working so hard to make peace shows the kind of person you are. The guilt was overwhelming. Jake thought I was being selfless and family-oriented, when actually I was working with federal agents to investigate Rachel's fiancé. Jake, can I ask you something? If you found out that someone you cared about was involved in something dangerous, but telling them the truth would destroy their happiness, what would you do? Is this about Brad, Emma? If you're having concerns about Rachel's fiancé, maybe you should talk to her directly. No, it's not specific to Brad. I'm just thinking about the ethics of protecting someone versus respecting their right to make their own choices, even if those choices might hurt them. Jake considered the question seriously. I think it depends on the kind of danger we're talking about. If someone's physical safety or financial security was at risk, I'd probably speak up regardless of the emotional consequences. But if it was just a matter of personal judgment or lifestyle choices, I might stay out of it. His answer reinforced my decision to cooperate with the FBI. If Brad really was a foreign spy, Rachel's safety could be at risk, not to mention national security. The emotional pain of discovering the truth would be devastating, but it was better than allowing her to unknowingly marry someone who had manipulated her from the beginning. The next morning, Agent Rodriguez called with urgent news. Emma,
We need to meet immediately. Brad made contact with his handlers last night, and we have some developments that change everything. I met the FBI team at a different location this time, a small office building in downtown Denver that looked like a typical business suite but was actually a secure federal facility. Director Mitchell, Agent Rodriguez, and Agent Park were all there, along with several other agents I hadn't met before. Emma, Director Mitchell began, last night at approximately 11:30 p.m., Brad Thompson met with two individuals at a restaurant in Westminster. Our surveillance team photographed the entire meeting, and we've identified both contacts as known Chinese intelligence operatives. She showed me photographs of Brad sitting at a table with two Asian men, clearly engaged in serious conversation. In one photo, Brad was handing over a manila envelope. In another, one of the men was giving Brad what appeared to be a thick envelope in return. We believe the envelope Brad gave them contained copies of your security clearance documents, along with the false information about satellite communications and weapons systems. The envelope he received likely contained payment and instructions for his next intelligence gathering objectives. Agent Park pulled up additional surveillance photos on her laptop. Emma, this is where things get complicated. After the meeting with his handlers, Brad drove directly to your parents' house. He was there for approximately 45 minutes, leaving just after 1 a.m. My blood ran cold. What was he doing at my parents' house that late at night? We don't know yet, but we have to assume he was gathering additional intelligence about you or your... Emma, we think Brad is accelerating his timeline. Something has made him feel pressured to gather as much information as possible before the wedding. Director Mitchell leaned forward. Emma, we need to consider the possibility that Brad suspects you're investigating him. His behavior last night suggests someone who's preparing for an exit strategy. The implications were terrifying. If Brad suspected I was working with the FBI, not only was the operation compromised, but my family could be in danger. Director Mitchell, what does this mean for Rachel's safety? If Brad is planning to disappear after the wedding, what happens to her? That's exactly what we need to find out. Emma, we're going to accelerate our timeline. We can't wait for the wedding to make our move. We need to arrest Brad before he has a chance to escape or potentially harm anyone in your family. Agent Rodriguez handed me a new communication device. Emma, we're going to need you to maintain normal contact with your family while we prepare for the arrest. If Brad contacts you or shows up unexpectedly, you need to alert us immediately. When are you planning to arrest him? Tomorrow night. We're going to take him into custody at his apartment away from you. Once he's in federal custody, we'll be able to search his residence and gather evidence about the full scope of his espionage activities. I felt a mixture of relief and terror, relief that the operation was almost over, and terror about how my family would react when they learned the truth. What am I supposed to tell Rachel? She's going to be devastated. Director Mitchell's expression softened slightly. Emma, we'll have victim services specialists available to help Rachel process what's happened, but you need to understand that learning the truth is going to be traumatic for her. Brad has been manipulating her for over a year, and the betrayal goes much deeper than just lying about his job. That afternoon, I tried to maintain my normal routine while feeling like my entire world was about to explode. I went to work, had lunch with Tyler, and answered routine emails, all while knowing that within 24 hours, my sister's fiancé would be in federal custody for espionage. Rachel called me around 5 o'clock, her voice bubbly with excitement. Emma, Brad told me you two had a great conversation yesterday, and that everything is worked out for the wedding. I'm so relieved that we can all be together for the happiest day of my life. The irony was crushing. Rachel was calling to thank me for making peace with the man who had been using her to spy on our country. Rachel, I'm so happy things worked out too. You deserve to have the perfect wedding day. Emma, can I ask you a favor? Brad and I are having a small dinner party tomorrow night for some of his work colleagues who are flying in for the wedding. Would you and Jake like to join us? Brad specifically asked me to invite you. My heart stopped. Brad was planning some kind of event for tomorrow night, the same night the FBI was planning to arrest him. This couldn't be a coincidence. Rachel, who are these work colleagues? Anyone I might know? I don't think so, they're from his international client group. Some kind of business dinner where they're going to discuss future opportunities. Brad said it would be great for networking, and he thought you might be interested since you work with government contractors too. Everything about this invitation felt wrong. Brad had spent months trying to keep me away from wedding events, and now he was specifically requesting my presence at a dinner with his international colleagues the night before his planned arrest. Rachel, where is this dinner happening? At the house in Cherry Creek. Brad's been planning it for weeks. He said it's important for his career advancement. I needed to alert the FBI immediately. This dinner could be Brad's final intelligence handoff before attempting to flee the country, or worse, it could be a trap designed to silence me if he suspected I was working with federal agents. Rachel, that sounds lovely. Let me check with Jake about our schedule and get back to you. As soon as I hung up, I called Agent Rodriguez. Carlos, we have a problem. Brad has invited me to a dinner party tomorrow night with his international colleagues. This has to be connected to his espionage activities. Emma, under no circumstances should you attend that dinner. If Brad suspects you're investigating him, this could be extremely dangerous. We're going to move up our arrest timeline and take him into custody this evening, but what about the dinner? If you arrest him tonight, won't that compromise your investigation into his handlers and the broader espionage network? There was a pause before Agent Rodriguez responded. Emma, you're right, this dinner could be our opportunity to identify and arrest Brad's entire network in one operation, but it would require you to attend the dinner while wearing surveillance equipment, which would put you in significant personal danger. Director Mitchell came on the line. Emma, I want to be very clear about what we're asking. If you agree to attend this dinner, you would be walking into a room full of suspected foreign intelligence operatives while working as a federal informant. The risks are substantial. I thought about Rachel excitedly planning her wedding to a man who had manipulated her from the beginning. I thought about the classified information that Brad had already stolen and the damage he could continue to cause if his network wasn't completely dismantled. And I thought about my oath to protect national security, even when it required personal sacrifice. Director Mitchell, I'll do it. But I want guarantees about my family's safety, and I want backup close enough to intervene if things go wrong. Emma, you'll have a full surveillance team positioned around the house, and Agent Rodriguez will be monitoring your communications in real time. At the first sign of danger, we'll move in. That evening I sat Jake down and told him a carefully edited version of the truth. Jake, I need to tell you something important about Rachel's wedding situation. There are some concerns about Brad that go beyond family drama, and tomorrow night, I'm going to help resolve them. I can't give you details, but I need you to trust me. Jake's expression became very serious. Emma, are you saying Brad is dangerous? Should we be worried about Rachel's safety? Rachel is going to be safe. I'm working with people who can protect her, but tomorrow night, I need you to stay away from the dinner party and wait for me to contact you. Can you do that for me? Emma, this sounds like more than family drama. Are you involved in something official? Something related to your security clearance? I couldn't lie to Jake anymore. Yes, and I can't tell you more than that right now, but after tomorrow night, everything will be different. Jake pulled me into his arms. I love you, Emma. Whatever you're doing, I trust your judgment. Just promise me you'll be careful. I promised. The next evening, I dressed carefully for what could be my final undercover operation. The FBI had provided me with advanced surveillance equipment disguised as jewelry and clothing accessories. Every word spoken at the dinner would be recorded, and my location would be monitored continuously. As I drove to Brad and Rachel's house in Cherry Creek, I thought about how dramatically my life had changed in just 2 weeks. I'd gone from being excluded from my sister's wedding to working as a federal informant in an espionage investigation. Tonight, I would either help expose a foreign intelligence network or walk into a trap that could end my life. The house was beautifully lit when I arrived, with several expensive cars parked in the driveway. Through the windows, I could see Rachel moving around the kitchen in a cocktail dress, clearly excited about hosting an important business dinner for her fiancé. Brad answered the door, wearing an expensive suit, his smile as charming as ever. "Emma? Thank you so much for coming. This means a lot to Rachel, and I'm excited for you to meet some of my international colleagues." As I stepped into the house, I noticed three men in the living room who didn't look like typical finance professionals. They were watchful and alert in a way that suggested military or intelligence training. One of them was taking photographs of the house's layout with his phone. "Emma?" Brad said, placing his hand on my back in a gesture that felt more controlling than welcoming. "Let me introduce you to my associates. These are the gentlemen I've been working with on some very lucrative international opportunities." The moment I walked into that living room, I knew I was in serious danger. These weren't businessmen, they were handlers, and based on their behavior, they suspected exactly who I was and why I was there, but it was too late to back out now. The operation was in motion, and within the next few hours, either Brad's entire espionage network would be dismantled, or I would discover just how far foreign intelligence services would go to protect their assets. Rachel appeared from the kitchen, beaming with pride. "Emma, isn't this exciting? Brad's colleagues are so impressed with our house and his success in Denver, they're talking about offering him an even better position with their company." Looking at my sister's innocent happiness, I realized that no matter what happened tonight, her world was about to be destroyed. But if I could help the FBI arrest these spies and protect national security, maybe Rachel's heartbreak would serve a greater purpose. The dinner began with polite conversation about business and Denver's economic development, but I could feel the tension in the room building as Brad's associates asked increasingly specific questions about my work and security clearance. They knew exactly who I was, and they were evaluating whether I was a threat to their operations. Halfway through the main course, one of the men excused himself to use the restroom. A few minutes later, Brad's phone buzzed with a text message. His expression changed immediately as he read it, and I saw fear flicker across his features for the first time since I'd known him. "Emma?" Brad said, standing up abruptly. "I wonder if you could help me with something in the kitchen." "Rachel, why don't you show our guests the view from the back patio?" As we walked toward the kitchen, I felt for the emergency alert button hidden in my bracelet. Whatever was about to happen, the FBI needed to know that the situation had changed. "Emma?" Brad said, once we were alone, his charming facade finally dropping away, "We need to talk about your recent activities. My associates have some concerns about your relationship with certain federal agencies." In that moment, I realized that the dinner party had been a trap from the beginning. Brad and his handlers knew I was working with the FBI, and they had lured me here to neutralize the threat I posed to their operations. But what they didn't know was that federal agents were positioned around the house, monitoring every word of our conversation and prepared to intervene at the first sign of violence. I activated the emergency alert and prepared for the most dangerous few minutes of my life. Whatever happened next would determine not only my survival, but the fate of a foreign espionage network that had been operating in the heart of America for over a year. "Brad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I think there are some things we need to discuss about your real occupation and your relationship with my sister." The trap was about to be sprung, but the question remained, who would be caught in it? The kitchen felt smaller than it had moments before, the ambient lighting that Rachel had chosen for her dinner party now casting ominous shadows across Brad's face. His transformation was complete. Gone was the charming finance professional who had won over my family, replaced by someone cold and calculating who spoke with the measured precision of a trained operative. "Emma? My associates ran some background checks on you after our coffee meeting yesterday. Imagine our surprise when we discovered that your recent security clearance renewal included some very interesting notations. Notations that suggest you've been in contact with federal counterintelligence personnel." My hand instinctively moved toward the emergency alert device, but Brad noticed the gesture immediately. "I wouldn't recommend trying to signal anyone, Emma. My colleagues are very thorough in their operational security. They've been monitoring local law enforcement communications all evening, and they're prepared for various contingencies. Through the kitchen window, I could see Rachel on the back patio, animatedly showing Brad's associates the landscaping she'd been so proud of. She had no idea that the men she was entertaining were foreign spies, or that her fiancé was threatening her sister just 20 feet away. Brad, I think you're overestimating my importance in whatever business you're really involved in. I work in corporate cybersecurity, not federal law enforcement, he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Emma, we know you discovered the breach in your company's defense contract systems last month. We also know that information led to a federal investigation that has been tracking our activities for the past several weeks. What we need to understand is exactly what you've told your FBI contacts and what evidence they've gathered. The casual way he mentioned the FBI confirmed that my cover had been blown, probably from the moment I'd handed him those fake security documents. I wondered how long the surveillance team outside would wait before intervening, and whether they could act quickly enough if this confrontation turned violent. Brad, I reported a cybersecurity breach to my company's security officer, which is standard protocol. If that triggered some kind of federal investigation, I wouldn't know the details. Come now, Emma, we're both professionals here. You've been meeting regularly with Director Sarah Mitchell and Agent Carlos Rodriguez. You've been wearing recording devices to family gatherings. And yesterday, you provided me with deliberately falsified security documents designed to expose our information gathering activities. The specificity of his knowledge was terrifying. He knew names, locations, and operational details that suggested his intelligence network was far more sophisticated than the FBI had realized. Brad, even if what you're saying is true, Rachel doesn't know anything about any of this. Whatever you're planning, leave her out of it. Rachel has been a valuable asset in our operation, even if she didn't realize it. Through her, we've been able to monitor your activities, gather information about your work, and position ourselves within your family structure. She's served her purpose admirably. The callousness with which he discussed my sister made my anger override my fear. Rachel loves you. She's planning to spend her life with you. How can you talk about her like she's just a tool in some spy operation? Emma? Personal attachments are luxuries that people in my profession can't afford. Rachel is an attractive, trusting young woman who provided excellent cover for my activities in Denver, but she was always temporary. After tomorrow's wedding, she would have accompanied me to Europe for our honeymoon, during which she would have suffered a tragic accident that left me a grieving widower, free to relocate with a new identity. The casual way he described planning Rachel's murder made my blood run cold. This wasn't just espionage. Brad was planning to kill my sister once she'd served her purpose in his operation. You're talking about murdering an innocent person who loves you. I'm talking about operational security and eliminating loose ends. Rachel knows too much about my activities in Denver, even if she doesn't understand the significance of what she's observed. In my business, that makes her a liability. From the dining room, I could hear the sound of chairs moving and conversation growing louder. Brad's associates were apparently preparing to join our conversation, which meant whatever was going to happen next would happen soon. Emma? Here's what's going to occur. You're going to tell me everything you've shared with the FBI, including the identities of all agents you've worked with, and the locations of any surveillance equipment in this house. In exchange, I'll ensure that Rachel's death appears accidental, rather than obviously violent. The offer was so grotesque that it took me a moment to process what he was actually saying. You're asking me to betray a federal investigation in exchange for you killing my sister more humanely. I'm offering you the opportunity to minimize the collateral damage from a situation that has already gone too far to be contained peacefully. Emma? Whether you cooperate or not, Rachel is going to die tonight. The only question is whether her death serves a larger purpose by protecting our operational security. I heard footsteps approaching the kitchen and knew that Brad's associates were moving into position. Whatever the FBI surveillance team was planning, they needed to act immediately, or this situation would escalate beyond anyone's ability to control it. Brad, before we go any further, I need you to understand something. The FBI has been monitoring this house all evening. Every word of this conversation has been recorded, and federal agents are positioned around the property. If you hurt Rachel or me, you'll be facing charges for assaulting federal informants in addition to espionage. His expression shifted slightly, the first crack in his confident demeanor. Emma? If you're bluffing, you're about to discover how seriously my associates take operational security threats. I'm not bluffing, Agent Rodriguez. If you're listening, now would be an excellent time for that backup you promised. The silence that followed felt eternal. Either the FBI was about to burst through the doors, or I had just escalated a dangerous situation into a lethal one by revealing information that could get both Rachel and me killed. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of vehicles pulling into the driveway at high speed, followed by car doors slamming and urgent voices shouting commands. The cavalry had arrived. Brad's face went pale as the reality of the situation hit him. Emma? You have no idea what you've just set in motion. My associates don't surrender to American law enforcement. From the back patio, I heard Rachel's voice calling out in confusion. Brad? Emma? What's happening? There are people with guns in our backyard. The front door burst open with a crash that shook the entire house. FBI, everyone on the ground now. Agent Rodriguez's voice cut through the confusion as federal agents flooded into the house with weapons drawn. Brad reached into his jacket, but I grabbed his wrist before he could draw whatever weapon he was carrying. Don't make this worse than it already is. Rachel doesn't need to see you die in her kitchen. The next few minutes were chaos. FBI agents swept through the house, shouting commands and securing the scene. I heard sounds of struggle from the living room as Brad's associates resisted arrest, followed by the distinctive sound of handcuffs clicking into place. Agent Rodriguez appeared in the kitchen doorway, weapon drawn but lowered when he saw that Brad had surrendered. Emma? Are you hurt? Did they threaten you? I'm okay, but Brad was planning to kill Rachel after the wedding. He said she'd served her purpose and had become a liability. Rachel burst into the kitchen behind Agent Rodriguez,
her face streaked with tears and her cocktail dress torn. Emma, what's happening? Why are there FBI agents in our house? Why is Brad in handcuffs? Looking at my sister's bewildered face, I realized that the hardest part of this entire operation was just beginning. The arrest was over, but Rachel's world was about to collapse as she learned the truth about the man she'd planned to marry. Director Mitchell entered the kitchen, her expression grim but satisfied. Emma, excellent work. We've arrested Brad Thompson and 3 members of his handler network. The intelligence you gathered over the past 2 weeks provided crucial evidence for building our case. Director Mitchell, Brad confessed to planning Rachel's murder. He said she was going to have a tragic accident during their European honeymoon. Rachel's knees buckled, and Agent Rodriguez caught her before she could fall. Murder? Emma, what are you talking about? Brad loves me. We're getting married tomorrow. Director Mitchell's voice was gentle but firm. Miss Collins, I'm afraid your fiancé has been operating as an asset for Chinese intelligence services. The relationship he developed with you was part of a larger espionage operation targeting your sister's access to classified defense information. The color drained from Rachel's face as the implications sank in. You're saying Brad was using me to spy on Emma? That our entire relationship was fake? Based on the evidence we've gathered, yes, Mr. Thompson specifically targeted you because of your family connection to Emma's security clearance and defense contractor work. Rachel looked between Director Mitchell and me, her expression cycling through disbelief, hurt, and dawning comprehension. Emma, how long have you known about this? How long have you been working with the FBI? The question I'd been dreading had finally come. Rachel, I only found out 2 weeks ago when Director Mitchell contacted me about the security breach I'd discovered at work. Everything happened very quickly after that. 2 weeks? Rachel's voice rose with incredulous anger. You've known for 2 weeks that my fiancé was a spy, and you didn't tell me. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward diplomatically. Miss Collins, Your sister was working under extremely dangerous circumstances to protect both national security and your personal safety. If we had revealed the investigation prematurely, it could have resulted in Brad and his associates escaping justice, and it could have put you in immediate physical danger. So instead, you let me continue planning a wedding to someone who was going to murder me on our honeymoon. The raw pain in Rachel's voice was devastating. She was right to be angry from her perspective. Everyone she trusted had conspired to deceive her, even if it was for her own protection. Rachel, I said, reaching toward her, but she stepped back. We were trying to protect you. If you'd known about the investigation, Brad might have realized we were onto him and disappeared before we could arrest him. Protect me. Rachel's laugh was bitter and hollow. Emma, I was sleeping next to a man who was planning to kill me. I was making love to someone who saw me as a disposable asset in a spy operation. How exactly were you protecting me? Director Mitchell intervened before the situation could deteriorate further. Miss Collins, I understand that you're hurt and angry. What you've experienced is a form of psychological manipulation that we see in intelligence operations targeting civilians. Brad Thompson is a trained operative who specialized in developing relationships for the purpose of gathering information. Nothing that happened between you was your fault. But it was all fake, Rachel said, her voice breaking. Every conversation, every kiss, every plan we made together, he was pretending the entire time. Not necessarily, Agent Rodriguez said gently. Intelligence operatives are human beings with genuine emotions even when they're conducting operations. It's possible that Brad developed real feelings for you even while maintaining his professional objectives. Rachel shook her head violently. Don't try to make me feel better by suggesting he might have actually loved me. He was going to kill me. Agent Rodriguez, whatever feelings he might have had weren't strong enough to outweigh his mission requirements. Over the next several hours, the house became a crime scene as FBI evidence teams processed every room for intelligence materials and surveillance equipment. Rachel and I were taken to the FBI field office for extensive debriefing sessions, where we had to relive every detail of our interactions with Brad and his associates. During my debriefing, Director Mitchell revealed the full scope of the espionage operation that Brad had been part of. Emma, the intelligence network you helped us expose was responsible for stealing classified information about satellite communication systems, missile guidance technology, and next-generation weapons platforms. The damage to national security could have been catastrophic if we hadn't intervened when we did. What's going to happen to Brad? He'll be charged with multiple counts of espionage, conspiracy to commit murder. Based on the evidence we've gathered, he's looking at life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The magnitude of what had been prevented was staggering, but all I could think about was Rachel sitting in another debriefing room, having to process the destruction of everything she'd believed about her future. Later that evening, Rachel and I sat in my apartment while Jake made tea and tried to provide comfort in a situation that defied normal support strategies. The wedding that was supposed to happen the next day had been canceled, the guests had been notified, and the venue had been transformed from a celebration space into part of an ongoing federal investigation. Emma, Rachel said, her voice hollow with exhaustion, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, when you were investigating Brad, did you find evidence that he ever loved me, even a little bit? The question broke my heart because I could see how desperately Rachel needed some small piece of their relationship to have been real. Rachel, I don't know. What I can tell you is that Brad made choices about how to treat you that showed he valued his mission more than your well-being. Whether he had feelings for you or not, he was willing to sacrifice your life for his operational objectives. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I keep thinking about all the times he seemed so interested in your work, or when he'd ask me questions about your security clearance. I thought he was just trying to understand my family better. I was so stupid. You weren't stupid, Rachel. You were targeted by a trained intelligence operative who specialized in manipulation. Director Mitchell said this kind of operation is designed to fool people, it's not a reflection of your judgment or intelligence. Jake sat down beside us with 3 cups of tea. Rachel, for what it's worth, Emma was torn apart by having to keep this secret from you. She lost weight, couldn't sleep, and was constantly worried about your safety. She never wanted to deceive you. I know, Rachel said quietly. Emma, I'm not really angry at you, I'm angry at the situation, and at myself for being so completely fooled, but I know you were trying to protect me. Over the following weeks, the full story of Brad's espionage operation made national news. The FBI held press conferences detailing how a Chinese intelligence network had been operating in Colorado for over 2 years, stealing classified defense information, and planning to expand their operations to other cities. Rachel became something of a reluctant celebrity as media outlets covered the story of the bride who discovered her fiancé was a foreign spy. She handled the attention with more grace than I would have expected, often using interviews to warn other people about the sophisticated manipulation techniques used by intelligence operatives. 3 months after Brad's arrest, Rachel and I were having lunch at the same Cherry Creek cafe where I'd first started gathering intelligence about Brad's suspicious lifestyle. The house in Cherry Creek had been seized by the federal government as part of the espionage investigation, and Rachel had moved back in with our parents while she rebuilt her life. Emma, I've been thinking about what Director Mitchell said about Brad potentially having real feelings for me despite his mission objectives. What about it? I've decided it doesn't matter. Even if he did love me in some way, he was still willing to kill me when I became inconvenient. That's not love, that's possession. Real love would have meant protecting me, not manipulating me. I was proud of Rachel's insight and emotional growth. The past 3 months had been incredibly difficult for her, but she'd shown remarkable resilience in processing the betrayal and rebuilding her sense of self-worth. Rachel, have you thought about what you want to do next? Career-wise, I mean. She smiled, and it was the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from her since Brad's arrest. Actually, yes. Director Mitchell offered me a position with the FBI's Victim Services Division. Apparently, my experience with intelligence manipulation makes me uniquely qualified to help other people who've been targeted by foreign operatives. That's amazing. Are you going to take it? I think so. If something positive can come from this nightmare, maybe it's helping other people avoid the kind of manipulation I fell victim to. 6 months later, I attended Rachel's graduation from the FBI Training Academy in Quantico. She'd excelled in her studies and been assigned to a counterintelligence unit specializing in identifying and disrupting foreign intelligence operations targeting American civilians. Jake and I had gotten married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Rachel as my maid of honor and Tyler as Jake's best man. It wasn't the elaborate wedding we'd originally planned, but it felt perfect, honest, intimate, and free from the kind of family drama that had defined so much of the previous year. At Rachel's graduation ceremony, Director Mitchell approached me during the reception. Emma, I wanted to thank you again for your exceptional work on the Thompson operation. Because of your courage and professionalism, we were able to dismantle an entire intelligence network and prevent significant damage to national security. Director Mitchell, I just did what anyone in my position would have done. Actually, Emma, very few people would have had the strength to do what you did. Working undercover against someone who was threatening your family, while maintaining operational security and gathering crucial intelligence that requires a special kind of person. She handed me an official-looking document. Emma, I'd like to offer you a position with the FBI's Cybersecurity Division. Your technical background and field experience make you an ideal candidate for our counterintelligence operations. I looked at the offer letter, then at Rachel across the room in her FBI Academy uniform, talking animatedly with her new colleagues about their upcoming assignments. Director Mitchell, thank you for the offer. It's incredibly flattering, and I'm honored that you'd consider me for such an important position. But I think I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. I'm happy in my current job, and Jake and I are planning to start a family soon. I want to get back to a normal life where the biggest crisis is a network security patch or a system upgrade.
Director Mitchell smiled understandingly. I respect that decision, Emma, but if you ever change your mind, the FBI would be lucky to have you. A year later, Rachel and I were planning a joint birthday party for our father. She was thriving in her FBI career, having been involved in several successful counterintelligence operations. I was back to my normal routine of corporate cybersecurity, but with a new appreciation for the importance of protecting sensitive information from foreign threats. The birthday party was held at my parents' house in Lakewood, the same dining room where I'd first overheard the conversation that started this entire ordeal. As we decorated for the party, Rachel and I talked about how much our relationship had strengthened through the crisis. Emma, can I tell you something I've never said before? Of course, even though everything that happened with Brad was terrible, I'm grateful that it happened. Not for the pain or the betrayal, but because it showed me who I really am, and what I'm capable of. And it brought us closer together as sisters. I feel the same way, Rachel. Going through something that intense together, it changes your relationship permanently. We know we can trust each other with anything now. Jake appeared in the dining room doorway, holding our 6-month-old daughter. Emma, someone wants to see her mommy. I took baby Sarah from Jake's arms, marveling at how normal and peaceful our life had become. The recording devices, secret meetings, and life-threatening confrontations felt like they belonged to a different person's life. Emma, Rachel said, watching me with the baby, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't overheard that conversation about Brad being concerned about your security clearance? I thought about the question seriously. I think Brad would have gone through with his plan. You would have married him, gone to Europe for your honeymoon, and never come back. The Chinese intelligence network would still be operating, stealing classified information, and potentially causing harm to American military personnel. So my heartbreak saved lives. Your heartbreak, my willingness to work with the FBI, and a lot of luck that everything came together when it did. That evening, as our family celebrated Dad's birthday with cake and presents, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed. 2 years ago, I'd been the reliable daughter who never caused drama or made waves. Now I was the sister who'd worked undercover for the FBI to expose a foreign spy ring. But more importantly, Rachel and I had evolved from siblings who took each other for granted into partners who'd faced genuine danger together and emerged stronger. She'd found her calling in counterintelligence work, and I'd discovered inner strength I never knew I possessed. As I watched Rachel telling our parents stories about her latest FBI assignment, I realized that sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most profound personal growth. Brad Thompson had targeted our family to serve foreign intelligence interests, but his manipulation had ultimately made us stronger, more aware, and more committed to protecting the things that really mattered. The emergency alert device that had once been hidden in my bracelet was now in a display case in Rachel's FBI office, a reminder of the night when everything had changed. But the real victory wasn't the arrest of a spy ring or the protection of national security. It was the knowledge that when our family faced its greatest crisis, we'd chosen to protect each other and do what was right, regardless of the personal cost. Sarah gurgled happily in my arms, completely unaware that her mother had once been a federal informant and her aunt was now a counterintelligence agent. With luck, she'd grow up in a world where those kinds of dramatic sacrifices weren't necessary. But if they ever were, I knew she'd have the strength to make them. After all, courage was apparently a family trait. 5 years after Brad's arrest, I stood in the conference room of TechSecure Solutions, presenting a cybersecurity briefing to a group of defense contractors. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now training other professionals to recognize the same type of security threats that had nearly destroyed my family. My presentation focused on insider threats and social engineering tactics used by foreign intelligence services to gather classified information through personal relationships. The most sophisticated attacks don't target your computer systems directly. I explained to the audience of security professionals, they target the people who have access to those systems. Foreign operatives are trained to identify individuals with security clearances and develop relationships that can be exploited for intelligence gathering purposes. During the break, a young woman approached me with a question that stopped me cold. Miss Martinez, I'm wondering if you could provide more specific examples of how these relationship-based intelligence operations work in practice. Have you ever encountered a case where someone was targeted through a family member? I looked at her more carefully and realized she reminded me of Rachel at that age, young, trusting, probably new to the world of government contracting and security protocols. Actually, yes, I can share a case study that might be helpful, though I'll need to change some of the identifying details for security reasons. For the next 20 minutes, I told a sanitized version of my own story, focusing on the operational security lessons rather than the personal trauma. I explained how Brad had used family gatherings to gather intelligence, how he'd positioned himself as knowledgeable about security issues to gain credibility, and how he'd systematically isolated potential threats to his operation. After my presentation, the young woman waited to speak with me privately. Miss Martinez, that case study you shared, it felt very personal. Was that based on something that happened to someone you know? Let's just say that the cybersecurity field has taught me that the most dangerous threats often come from the people we trust most. The important thing is learning to recognize the warning signs and knowing how to respond when something doesn't feel right. That evening, I called Rachel to tell her about the presentation. She was now a senior agent in the FBI's Counterintelligence Division and had been involved in exposing several foreign intelligence networks operating in the United States. Our shared experience with Brad had become a foundation for both our careers and our relationship as sisters. Emma, I had an interesting case come across my desk today. A defense contractor in San Diego reported suspicious behavior from an employee's new boyfriend. The pattern is almost identical to what we experienced: international finance background, sudden wealth, unusual interest in his girlfriend's security clearance status. Are you going to investigate? We're already building a case. Emma, what happened to us wasn't unique. These operations are happening all over the country, targeting families with access to classified information. But because of what we learned from the Brad situation, we're getting better at identifying and stopping them before they can cause damage. 6 months later, Rachel called me with news that Brad had died in federal prison. He'd been serving a life sentence without parole for espionage and conspiracy to commit murder, but had apparently been attacked by other inmates who discovered his cooperation with Chinese intelligence services. How do you feel about it? I asked her. Honestly, relieved. I know that sounds terrible, but as long as he was alive, there was always a chance he could be released, or escape, or find some way to hurt us again. Now that chapter of our lives is finally closed. I understood exactly what she meant. Brad's death represented the end of a threat that had loomed over our family for years. Even after his conviction, there would be no appeals, no possibility of escape, no chance that he could somehow reach out to us or other potential victims. That weekend, Jake and I took our children, Sarah was now 5, and we'd had a son, Michael, 2 years later, to visit my parents in Lakewood. The house looked exactly the same as it had during those tense weeks when I'd been working undercover for the FBI, but the atmosphere was completely different. Where there had once been family secrets and hidden agendas, there was now transparency and trust. Over dinner, Sarah asked a question that caught everyone off guard. Mommy, Grandma said you used to be a spy, is that true? Jake and I had discussed how to handle questions about my FBI work. As the children got older, we decided on honesty appropriate to their age level. Sarah, I helped the FBI catch some bad people who were trying to steal important secrets from our country. It was dangerous, but it was the right thing to do. Were you scared? Yes, I was very scared, but sometimes we have to do scary things to protect the people we love. Rachel smiled at my explanation. Sarah, your mom was very brave. She helped catch people who wanted to hurt our family and our country. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Rachel and I sat on the back patio where she'd once entertained Brad's intelligence handlers during that final dinner party. The space had been completely renovated since then, but we both remembered the night when everything had changed. Emma, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd made different choices, if you hadn't agreed to work with the FBI, or if I'd somehow figured out what Brad was really doing? I think about it sometimes, but honestly, Rachel, I can't imagine our lives turning out better than they have. You found your calling in counterintelligence work. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible, and our family is closer than it's ever been. Plus, we probably saved lives by exposing that intelligence network. Exactly, whatever pain we went through, it served a larger purpose. As we talked, I realized that the experience with Brad had fundamentally changed how I approached every aspect of my life. I was more observant, more questioning, more willing to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. Those skills had made me better at my job, better at protecting my family, and better at navigating the complexities of adult relationships. Rachel had experienced an even more dramatic transformation. The naive young woman who'd fallen for Brad's manipulation had become a skilled federal agent who specialized in protecting other people from similar threats. Her personal experience with intelligence manipulation made her uniquely effective at identifying and disrupting foreign operations. The drive home to Boulder that night was peaceful, with both children sleeping in their car seats and Jake handling the driving, while I reflected on how far we'd all come. The mountains looked majestic in the moonlight, the same peaks that had provided the backdrop for Rachel's planned wedding to a foreign spy. Jake, do you ever regret that our life isn't more ordinary? Most couples don't have FBI stories to tell their children. Emma, ordinary is overrated. What we went through together proved that we can handle anything life throws at us. That's a pretty solid foundation for a marriage. The next morning, I woke up to a text message from Director Mitchell, who had recently been promoted to Deputy Director of the FBI. Emma, congratulations on your presentation at the Defense Contractors Conference. We've received several requests for you to conduct similar training sessions at other locations. Would you be interested in consulting work? The offer was tempting. I'd enjoyed sharing the lessons learned from our experience with Brad, and if it could help other families avoid similar manipulation, it seemed worthwhile. But I also valued the normal life Jake and I had built together. I called Rachel to get her perspective. What do you think? Is there value in me doing more training and consulting around these issues? Emma, you have a unique perspective that could be incredibly valuable to the intelligence community. You understand both the technical aspects of cybersecurity and the personal dynamics of how families can be manipulated. That combination is rare. Over the following months, I began taking on consulting assignments with various government agencies and defense contractors, teaching cybersecurity professionals how to recognize and respond to relationship-based intelligence operations. The work was fulfilling in a way that my regular job hadn't been because it felt like I was contributing directly to national security. During one training session at a military base in Colorado Springs, a colonel approached me after my presentation. Martinez, your insights into family-based intelligence operations are remarkable. Have you considered writing a book about these tactics? It could be valuable for both security professionals and ordinary citizens. The idea hadn't occurred to me, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. There were probably thousands of families across the country who were vulnerable to the same type of manipulation we'd experienced, and most of them had no idea how to recognize or respond to such threats. That evening, I called Jake to discuss the colonel's suggestion. What do you think about me writing a book about our experience with Brad and what we learned about foreign intelligence operations? I think it's a great idea, as long as you're comfortable sharing our story publicly. It could help a lot of people. 6 months later, I submitted a manuscript proposal to several publishers for a book tentatively titled, The Family Target: How Foreign Spies Infiltrate American Homes. The proposal included a detailed account of our experience with Brad, analysis of similar cases from FBI files, and practical guidance for recognizing and responding to relationship-based intelligence operations. The book was published 18 months later and became a bestseller in the national security and true crime categories. Rachel wrote the foreword, describing her experience as both a victim of intelligence manipulation and a federal agent working to prevent similar operations. On the book's publication day, Rachel and I appeared together on a national television program to discuss foreign intelligence threats targeting American families. The interviewer asked Rachel what advice she would give to other young women who might be targeted by foreign operatives. "Trust your instincts," she said. "If someone seems too good to be true, if they ask a lot of questions about your family's work, if they have unexplained wealth or unusual knowledge about security protocols, pay attention to those red flags, and remember that manipulation tactics are designed to fool people. Being deceived doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human." The interview generated hundreds of emails from viewers sharing their own experiences with suspicious relationships and thanking us for bringing attention to these threats. Several of those tips led to FBI investigations that exposed active intelligence operations. As I read through the responses, I realized that our decision to go public with our story had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond our own family's experience. By sharing what we'd learned, we were helping to protect countless other families from similar manipulation. That night, as I tucked Sarah and Michael into bed, Sarah asked me another question about the book. "Mommy, are you famous now?" "Not famous, sweetheart, just someone who learned important lessons and wanted to share them with other people so they could stay safe." "Like a teacher." "Exactly like a teacher." As I turned off the lights in their room, I reflected on how the most traumatic experience of our lives had ultimately led to some of our greatest achievements. Rachel had found her calling in protecting others from intelligence manipulation. I had discovered a new purpose in educating people about these threats, and our family had developed an unshakable bond forged in crisis and strengthened by shared purpose. The recording device that had once captured Brad's confession now sat in a place of honor in Rachel's FBI office, a reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort. And sometimes, the most devastating betrayals become the foundation for the most meaningful victories. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.